Okay, welcome everyone to our live NDC sync. We actually do these every Friday on Twitter Spaces, but this is the first time we're doing this in person. Very exclusive opportunity to see this. We have a lot of topics to discuss, but I think we'll start with introductions. We have a great panel of very interesting people here. And why don't you guys introduce yourselves and what you do in NEAR, in NDC, in general, whatever you think is appropriate. And let's start with AVB and go that way.
GM. My name is AVB. I'm here from the Transparency Commission, long-term community member, and here to keep the bastards honest.
Hey everybody, Blaze from Council of Advisors, also the champion of NDC, so been in the ecosystem a long time. Glad that we have NDC online. Despite any bumps or little bruises that we have, it's actually progressing, so excited to be here and talk with everybody.
Hello everyone, I'm Zahid, founder of Jutsu, and we make the developer experience much better, and we are helping She's Near, one of the DAO from NDC, to kind of bring education for women, and we are helping them with all the support they need.
Hello, I'm Boris Polania. I'm from DevHub. We're leading the charge of NEAR's developer engagement, and we are everything that is related with developers and technical partnerships. We are the ones working on it.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we have a lot of topics to discuss. I guess we'll start with very basics, especially if we have people listening to us who don't know what the NDC is, who have never heard of NDC. I think we'll go in a free format, so I'll just drop a question and whoever wants to pick it up, feel free to do so. And to start with the most basic is, what is the NDC and what is its purpose? So what does it exist for? What was it created for? And what it is, of course.
Yeah, I'll just kick it off. So the NDC really was created by a vision from Ilya to create decentralized governance in the NEAR ecosystem. So it really has like three pillars. It's focused on establishing governance within the ecosystem. Right now it has a primary focus of funding, so that's funding the grassroots community. That means communities, projects within the NEAR ecosystem to grow NEAR and sustain NEAR. And then the next, last but not least, is decentralization. So it's about continuing to decentralize the power of the ecosystem into the broader community, and to, in the longer term, help spin out certain functions of NEAR Foundation into the ecosystem so that we're more anti-fragile, more resilient, and more censorship resistant.
Anyone wants to add to that? So I guess before we jump into specifics, let's talk a little bit on theoretical level. What do you guys think? Why is it important to have decentralized funding specifically? Decentralized funding versus centralized funding? What are the trade-offs? And why are we trying to do it the decentralized way?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start again. But the overall mission and vision, or we'll say the vision of NEAR, is to give people the power over their assets, data, and governance. And so that's always been kind of the premise that NEAR has been operating on, to really create self-sovereignty for the world, and allow them to allow them to have access and power over their data, like we know Web 2, and we think about that most of the corporate conglomerates, they use people's information to then sell them things, manipulate them into buying things. So it's really to give them the power over their data assets. We know that countries around the world, people are really striving for more autonomy and more independence, more self-sovereignty. So providing the place that they really have access to their keys and their data. And then governance, everybody should have a voice in governance that's part of the ecosystem. And so that's what we're working on also in NDC. But yeah, that's really why it's important at the end of the day. Why decentralized funding versus centralized? So the Near Foundation primarily had the grant program that they ran for the past several years. One of the issues with that is that there was a lot of complaints from the grassroots community that funding was not transparent, that it also was not applicable to the grassroots community, but there were a lot of more of the funding was going to larger deals or larger corporations. So the grassroots community felt like it was underserved. And so Near Foundation made the move to give the community their own treasury, which now we have at current prices about $20 million in the treasury. And then we developed a governance structure over that to be able to govern that treasury. And so that's kind of the premise. But to make funding more transparent, to make sure that the community had a voice in the funding process, and to ensure that the community could also manage their own funds. That's really the benefit.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie, I didn't hear the question. What was the question again?
Centralized funding versus decentralized funding, what are the trade-offs? And why do we pick one over the other?
Centralized funding would be efficiency. There's one person who is responsible, or a group of people. The downside would be that efficiency doesn't lead to good outcomes. You could waste money efficiently. Decentralized funding, it's the complete opposite. You could have wisdom of the crowds, perhaps in sourcing more talent, in enabling more people to go get those deals, to provide feedback. But it can also be very messy. It can be just more steps to get to where you want to be, and perhaps the challenges we have now is unclear steps to where you want to be. So yeah, it's a dance between where are we at now and what do we need.
Okay, thank you. So Blaise, you touched a little bit on governance framework. Let's dive into that. What is the governance framework for the NDC? What are the key components of it? And just anything else you think is relevant.
Cool. Yeah, so we have our first Congress live now, and that's comprised of 3 houses. So we have the House of Merit, which is responsible for deploying the funding to the community, as well as kind of following up on the progress and the outcomes and ensuring that funding that's going out actually has a real impact. Transparency Commission, which is the watchdogs over governance and the community treasury. So they're really filtering requests from the community on, misappropriation of funds, conflicts of interest, misconduct, and kind of trying to establish what the culture is going to be like. Really, that's the end game, is what kind of culture are we going to have, and making sure that, there's good guidelines around our culture and how we should operate together. And then there's Council of Advisors, which is really about casting a strategic vision for the Congress, what priorities we're going to execute, what areas of funding are highest, and how we're going to make a real impact. And that's really the 3 governing bodies. Within that, we also have the voting body, which is at the moment every human on NEAR. So, at the outset of kind of launching governance, we looked at a lot of different voting mechanisms from around Web3. And one of the challenges that we found was that most of them, have stake-weighted voting as a premise, which creates, plutocracy in the end. And, we wanted to create something that was more fair for our grassroots community, so that, your voice is not dependent upon the balance of your wallet. And so we went that way and created the one person, one vote, which we did basically a simple KYC, which was a face scan. I know a lot of folks are, obviously not comfortable with that. So we're looking to improve that voting mechanism in the next election, which should be happening actually in late May. Lastly, I would say that the other thing we experience is that even with every voting mechanism that's in Web3, they can all really be gamed, right? And so creating something that's civil resistant, that gives really power to the community, is very difficult to do, and it really hasn't been accomplished well in Web3. So that's really what we're working on at NDC, is how do you give power to the community and all the stakeholders in the ecosystem to make sure their voices are heard.
Yeah, and as we begin to set the scene, to warm up, to get the spices into the room, I think it'd be good to mention, if you were wondering, the panel was meant to be a lot bigger. So We had guests from the House of Merit that are not here, one additional guest from the Council of Advisors also not here, TC, and we've got DevHub as an additional community vehicle that they also do funding, different approach, could provide some perspectives into the way that they've done things and perhaps different outcomes, and a rockstar founder. We don't know how he's in the panel, but he's also very valuable as far as what the average top-tier contributor perceives the governance to be. So Boris and Zahid, please jump ahead because Blaise and I talk about this a lot, so just give us a sign and we'll let you in. In regards to the structure of the governance framework, it'd be good to perhaps start to tease out. It is a V1. There were probably some design trade-offs made just to make it to the, to the due date. And there's also some things that make it very unique. So one person, one vote is something that has come up as, should we have this? Is it desirable? There's also the things that have come up around the size of the houses, 15 people in the House of Merit, 7 in Congress, 7 in Transparency Commission. Is it the right time to have that many people coordinate things? So there are some things that make this model unique. And unique could be good, could be bad, could be too early, could be too late. So that's sort of the conversation that we're having now. First, understand what we have. The first couple of months, there's been a lot of communications for the community to understand how the NDC is supposed to work. And there's also been a very healthy, sometimes unhealthy feedback cycle where we're getting a lot of inputs from the community. We are aware of some things that need improvement that are scheduled to be improved. And we're just covering some things by just, crashing into walls and making notes. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe not a lot of people know, but Blaise was actually the NDC champion for GWG, so he was here before the NDC even started. And, it would be very interesting to hear, so NDC obviously being like a big experiment. I'm sure there was a certain vision when you guys started building it. And I would like to know how closely did that vision align with what the NDC is today?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? You have a vision. So, anytime you do something that's going to be iterative, we're going to learn, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be issues, right? And really, most of it is unforeseen. So the one thing that did happen that was unforeseen is that, there's kind of multiple communities within, the NEAR ecosystem. And so some of those communities decided to form together to create a coalition. And that was kind of something we didn't script in. It was unscripted. There weren't any rules against it. But that coalition, not that it's right, wrong, or indifferent, they actually had the ability, based on the numbers that they pulled together and the following that they had, to take over most of the seats in the first election. So that's primarily who's in governance right now. Some of the, the kind of impact of that is that we learned a lot of lessons. Like, for instance, we kind of just started with that you had to be an OG in our ecosystem to run. That meant that you've been here for at least a year, or you were a member of, a project or of a node in the ecosystem that was already formed. So we issued these OG SBTs, and we thought that was a pretty good safeguard. But then what happened is we had folks elected into Congress that may not have a background in governance or funding or business, right, which created quite a challenge. So that's something we're working through now, and we're going to be discussing about what kind of criteria should we have for this next Congress to be able to be a member of Congress, or should we just keep it free form and open like it is today? But we also anticipate that there'd be more funding going out to the community, and it's kind of been challenging because one of the items I mentioned was not everybody really has the same evaluation of funding. So, if a proposal comes through and it's for, 50,000 US, in NEAR, some folks may think that for that proposal it's a lot, and some people may think, well, okay, it's reasonable. And so now that we have a House of 15 members, a few have resigned, so now we're down to 13, I believe. 8 of those have to agree that that particular amount is acceptable to approve it for that thing to be funded. And so that has presented a challenge. So we've gotten some things funded, some things that should have been funded that maybe didn't get approved. So yeah, that part is a work in progress. I would say that was unanticipated.
Okay. I have a question. So my question is do you have a matrix for internal and external valuation? So how you measure, or how do you fund, and what are the criteria you are using? Is it just because I like this founder, or I like this project, or I like this technology, or whatnot? Do you have a guideline for those kind of selection? And then after you select those projects, it's already, I think, 7-8 months. So Jutsu started almost the same time when NDC started. So I remember in the last NDC panel I was there, we talked about these things. So how do you measure all the funding you already provided, and which one is working, and how do you know you are learning from external kind of investing? In my mind, giving grant is kind of investing. So when you are investing, some investment will be good investment, some will be bad. But what is your way of kind of learning from it? Do you have any system around those things?
I'll go first just to say that is the job of the House of Merit, whose representatives are not here, and it is a fair question to them. As far as the Transparency Commission goes, we could process complaints for incompetence, for having a lack of frameworks for allocating money or measuring impact. But that is a very valid question. And as you mentioned, Jutsu, I was thinking, born 1 year ago here at ETH Denver at the Supermoon Buildhouse. Hey!
Thanks to Supermoon.
People at the back woke up, hope you're hacking something good. And, the impact that Jutsu has had, there's been several hackathon winners around the world. There's been boss components deployed. So maybe it would be great if you could provide some insights separately to the House of Merit on how you measure impact for your project, what sort of metrics would VCs want to see from your project. Because if we were to fund or support our early founders before they get to the VC level, we want to make sure that we're aligned, but enabling people, earlier stage. Now moving to Blaze's point, some of us did say that some things may go off the rails, one person, one vote, there's utopia, there's pragmatic reality. But if we look a little bit past a group of people dominating Congress, whatever, there's actually a major shift in the NEAR ecosystem. The key people that supported NDC are no longer there. And perhaps the original vision of giving power back to the community, if the frustration was that Foundation was too corporate or too out of touch with the builders, to me NDC was, let's get the money out of the Foundation in the hands of builders, there's strong alignment from the founder all the way to us in the trenches, and that's how we get control. It is strange and makes you wonder how at the very same time that the community gets control, the chief founder goes back into NF. So there's something there around the vision of how do we decentralize power away from the leader who's now actually the most aligned with the community. And those are just issues to navigate because, yeah, it leads to perhaps the role of the NDC being questioned, leads to morale issues, leads to members being inactive, leads to, honestly, founders just not wanting to touch the NDC because they heard that the Foundation is now founder-friendly. So there's many things that are an issue inside, fair complaints, but there's also ecosystem-wide conversations that are just not being had. And they're not being had, but they're also not invisible to people. So yeah, it was a great question.
We're having similar issues with the funding, right? Actually, same issues, and we now have clear guidelines of what we found and what we don't. People get mad at us a lot, even though the guidelines are clear. But the issue is that if you have we haven't struck that balance of flexibility, because if the rules of the guidelines are too rigid, so the people become like grand hunters, right? They will tailor their proposal to fit to the guidelines you created. So it's hard to say no. So there is always a subjective part that we say, okay, we see that you fit the guidelines, but there is something up here. So that balance of flexibility, that the rules are flexible enough that we can have some wiggle room when the time to say yes or no, and rigid enough so people knows what to do. It's been hard to strike, and even so, some projects always feel that they were unjustly denied, or they deserved the money, or this thing didn't deserve the money, but I deserve the money. So it's been hard to strike that balance. So right now, you're talking about trade-off or centralization, decentralization. I don't call what we do centralization, but the trade-off is we can be more efficient. We can have the decision more quickly, and yeah. But still, it's hard. It's hard, and that will be a big challenge for you guys to be able. The moment you create a guidelines, all the things we have, all the proposals start looking each other similar. So you will start saying, oh, they're similar because they are trying to fit whatever we set as the guidelines. So.
I just want to add one more thing. So we received a
full disclosure. I haven't read your proposal yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Approved.
So one of the things that I liked. One of the first feedback from our proposal was like it have to be milestone based, and you have to kind of justify like every milestone that you deserve the next milestone. And I love that because like that also motivate us to kind of go above and beyond to do the stuff. So I don't want to name, but I know a lot of other people who kind of get grant and then do the work for like a great work for a few months, and then those projects are kind of nowhere. And so the way I see one of the big problem with the ecosystem is all this project like getting grant and then not taking responsibility. So like if from Jutsu our side, like in the grant we say like we will make the best developer onboarding experience, and we will own that part. And then if developer experience become really, really bad, and I want the community and NDC or Dev Hub to come to us and then say like, hey, you guys are doing shitty job, you should do something better. So those kind of things, I think if you can put those guardrail and a little bit flexibility, then I think community can do a lot of stuff. Like a part of decentralizing the grant is great, but also the community, you'll be surprised to see like how efficient the community is. And people, like I joined some of the community tool meetings where I see a team or a guy is so much interested in kind of a hand coding, like the WASM internal thing that I would probably not do it, or a team, like you'll need a team of people. So I think empowering individual teams, but also giving them some rules, I think that will probably solve some of the challenges.
Well, in strange ways, it fills me with joy to know everyone is struggling with the same thing. And not because I like to see others suffer partially, but because it is easy to deflect to a failing body when the problem is not going to go away if you kill the body. The problem is exactly the same. It's just going to rename something else and fail again separately. See, we did try. House of Merit, in its name, has merit in it. And the reason why it mattered at some point before it got diluted is because you do need the discretion to know what matters. And as a famous American judge said when defining pornography, or I think it was dirty content. You don't know until you see it. We need people to lead and say, we've got a fuck ton of money. Not going to give it to anyone, but when we see something that has value, even if the guideline doesn't say it explicitly, we'll give it to you. Dude, we spend most of the time with people that A, don't know how to read a guideline or interpret it, and B, they're following it like it's Google Maps. I missed the left turn, I'm no longer in the same country. It's like, we have some room to use our brain for that North Star outcome. And I said it before, I'll say it again, got a TC complaint for this. We went wrong in putting people in positions of power that should have never been in positions of power. We burned founders that would have been great leaders in that house to put in their low-tier employees. We have people that are single-handedly responsible for every protocol upgrade resign. These are not minor issues. And every time we face this issue, the focus seems to be on watering down the guidelines to keep the same dead body dragging down the street. The issue is not the quorum. The issue is, where are the big brains that stepped up to lead this? Because they're not in the conversation. And unless they come back, this is not worth continuing. So,
yeah, and I'll just respond to that. So, you know, as we were launching NDC, one of the things that we knew that we needed was leaders, right? So as part of, you know, on this journey, we launched something called the Ecosystem RoundTable. So we pulled in all leaders throughout the ecosystem. We said, hey, we're launching NDC. We want to run this by you. You know, I gave them weekly updates or bi-weekly updates on progress. And then it came time to election time. At that point of election, we went to the round table and we said, hey, we're ready, you know, to launch this. How many of you founders and leaders in the ecosystem are interested? And really, we didn't receive any interest from the round table, which was interesting. But basically, the standard comment back from them was, we're so busy trying to keep the lights on because we're in a bear market of our own project, of our own product, that we don't have the additional bandwidth to turn around and do governance, right, and deploy all this funding to the grassroots community. So it is a challenge, I think, about just like, and I think it highlights a challenge overall around leadership in Web3 and having the ability to attract leaders, retain leaders, and have them contribute to governance, right? And so in most cases, governance in ecosystems is very centralized, and you have a small team of people really governing, or you have your early adopters, your VCs, your backers, your whales really dominating the vote as well. So it really is something that's very complex to solve. So what we did then is kind of what I said before. We went back to the OGs of the ecosystem and we said, okay, this is the next tier down. Let's try to get them engaged and run the election. And I want to say that most of our valuable OGs came out and ran. But the challenge we had is because the coalition formed, they're all off the cusp of, you know, being voted in to the houses. So they're just like 2 or 3 down. So it was just one of those things where they found a loophole to say, if we vote for one another, we can all get in. And that's exactly what happened.
Blaze, so it seems from what you're saying that a major issue in what happened to the NDC was the way elections went. Being now today, and we have the next election in 2 months, the end of May, what do you think we should do differently? How should it be redesigned to prevent the same thing that just happened to happen again?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One, stake-weighted voting's back on the table, right? So that's kind of being a proposal is being created to move this whole voting mechanism, remove one person, one vote, go to only stake-weighted voting. Obviously, that has a big impact on the grassroots community because most of the community does not have near staked. So we did the analysis. We found out that, you know, most of the stake is pretty concentrated, which is how it is across all Web3 ecosystems. So we know we still need some kind of one person, one vote. But right now we're talking about quadratic voting. But beyond that, I think that a couple of things that we've learned, lessons learned, and we want to make sure we implement are that there should be some minimal criteria for the level of experience that you have to be able to run for Congress, number one. Number two, we need to put a limit on how many representatives from a specific project, node, community can be in governance, so we avoid the situations where, you know, a certain faction is basically the primary members of governance. So those two would really help out. And then three, we've got to kind of figure out, if we do end up having to keep the one person, one vote, how can we make that more robust, and then, you know, also empower more communities in the process as well. So yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a challenge, frankly, that has not been solved in Web3 yet, and we're trying a completely different and radical approach. The one thing I'll say back on the funding side is this: the NDC operates a little bit differently in that what we want to do is actually establish vertical nodes for funding that have expertise. So we have 10 funding nodes approved right now. So for instance, one of the challenges that we had with Near Foundation prior is a small team looked at every vertical, whether it was NFT or, you know, productivity or social. You had the same team looking at every proposal, but the challenge with that was they don't have those vertical expertise. So in NDC, we established more nodes, funding nodes. So we have up to 10 funding nodes. So there's one for NFTs, there's one for, you know, marketing, one for creatives. So we have kind of these verticals that we can establish, but that is a different faction there.
Like in a good comedy, yes, and we get a higher level of expertise than whomever was in the Near Foundation before, because if we're realistic, we basically just picked up anybody that was already in the community that had a mild interest in that vertical. I look at other ecosystems, Sui Gaming, shockingly good. Play Ember, shunned out from the community. Near Gaming, great contributors, another TC complaint incoming. So we have to be realistic of, if we're going to put in the work to create a vertical, also let's be honest and getting out the best people. We're paying top dollars for the same community contributors from 3 years ago. I know people that are still on payroll, almost 3 years in. They've outlasted 3 Near Foundation CEOs and 9 different narratives and 17 different charts, and no one can get rid of them. If community equals mediocre, we're not going to go anywhere. So there has to be that push of, we got to police ourselves, and either we push for higher standards or Big Boss is going to kill this. Like, it's not a secret.
Can I ask? So I'm just curious about, like you mentioned, so already it is hard to fill up all these different roles in different vertical, or like if you further divide into like a more granular, like how you are going to do the hiring, like bringing the best talent for all of those different specific verticals. So that's one thing. And if you don't have all the mechanism to kind of analyzing how we are doing, like in this 16 or this 4 different House of Merit and like all these groups, then if you further divide, like when I'm building a software, right? So like I want to first, the way I think about like everything is like a software. So like you want to figure out how these 4 modules you'll test and you'll deploy before like you make it more smaller microservices and all these things. Because what end up happening is like you spend all your time kind of managing all these microservices, then end up not improving the whole process at all. So like isn't it better to like whatever you have, find the best people and kind of improve that, put together all the standard so that there is a threshold of like our filter, like where they do the best job, and if they don't do the best job, then like there should be a way to kind of manage that.
Say it. Get rid of them.
I don't want to say like I'm just saying like if it is probably easy for a startup, like when you are decentralized, probably it's much more difficult. But at least some sort of standard like when you give a company grant or a project grant, you put those milestones, right? If we don't follow that milestone, it is fair for both the grantor and grantee to kind of get rid of, like removing that contract.
I mentioned it in the infamous panel we had at NearCon. I think it aged really well. Hopefully this one will perform even better. In engineering terms, it's actually much easier to know when something has succeeded or failed, because the code literally doesn't run. And if you're launching a rocket, it blows up. In a social experiment, we just keep shifting the language and whatever, another month, another pay, it dies next week. It's much more malleable. And I think that's why most of the engineers who are actually very structured and who understand what they need to do to succeed just tap out. Yeah, I was going to say something else, but...
Yeah, I think it comes back to, you're right. You have to kind of improve the core of governance, right? You have to stand up those processes and procedures and make that more robust. But at the same time, we have the mandate to fund the community, right? So we're doing three things at once. We're building governance, we're funding the community, and we're decentralizing, right? Which is a very tall order. And of those, funding's probably the primary one, but sometimes we don't get that right. But at the end of the day, it comes back to this simple premise. You must attract and retain talent. Without talent in the system to create those operational procedures with the know-how, then they're not going to actually get done, right? And so our current challenge is that we probably don't have enough talent in Congress, and for those that we do have in Congress that are very talented, they are so busy with their own projects that they still don't have the time to contribute, right?
I remember I was going to say, it's interesting to have a comparison on how our projects or grantees ranked against, say, public servants, but there's another really important distinction. When you're innovating or building a product, you can have many people competing on the same vertical on the same product. In fact, if you're smart, fund 6 different teams to build the same thing. Let the best team win. You keep doubling down, every 6 months, get rid of 2. We have a monopoly in governance. You know what would be amazing? Let's spin up 6 NDCs. Every 2 months, get rid of a team. And let's measure how governance can improve as a product. How can you be a leading blockchain with async sharding and AI robots and shit, and have people running these like it's a council in some developing country? Like, there needs to be a way for people to compete in the way that, they organize, they allocate funding, they measure funding. I hear people sighing in the audience. We can open for questions if you want.
Yeah, I just said, so my background, the way I got in, so just for a little bit of background. So I've been in crypto. I was a political scientist. Bitcoin was my 3rd token experiment. So I've been part of this thing for the whole entire thing. But my background before that brought me to this was political science. And so in political science, in studies of government and in the understanding of government, the conflict that you would arise from such warring parties, but it would be like, it's like a civil war, because you're creating these armies and things like that. And then when I got into corporate, I used to think before, and it's something that maybe all of us thought before we got into corporate. We're thinking, okay, this is a company. Everyone in the company is working for the greater good of the company. And every company that I've been in, that's been untrue, by and large. But every once in a while, I found a company culture, but it's usually in like things like retail. Like I look at the Gap, I ask my friends that work at the Gap, and they're like down for the Gap. Car Shield. They're like, I'm Car Shield for life. But inside of tech, I've had companies that I've worked with. So I've worked with dozens of companies over the years, and I've had companies that I've worked with where you ask 3 founders about what the company does, and all 3 of them have a different vision for the company. And these are the founders, and they still haven't communicated clearly what the vision is. And the same thing can happen within companies, can happen within organizations and governments. So it needs to be a top down. The only thing that I think should have been done differently, the main thing, so you can't attack a problem until you've really clearly defined the problem. And the problem is that the vision isn't all in alignment. But the near ecosystem has within it. So I met Cameron in Jackson Hole a couple of years ago. They bring 100 of the people, or it was during COVID, so it was like 80 of us. of the top people in the industry together. So it was like Bill Ty and all of us, and I got to hang out and listen to this guy. And Matt Lockyer is a friend of mine. So Matt had always told me about NEAR since he started here, which was in the very beginning, and tried to recruit me as an engineer here, but I was moving away from engineering. But Cameron's vision was about education. His background is in education and in college programs, and his vision was getting this NEAR ecosystem live in throughout education, educating the youth, and building a class over time. So that gave me hope, and I started putting more attention and telling more people about the NEAR ecosystem. So that vision, and that his vision doesn't have to be the vision, but there needs to be a discussion around what the vision is, what this is actually doing, what is clearly the mission. So then you can align, like with the United States Army or whatever. We know what the mission is, and we know what the goal is, and we know that the preservation of the nation is the goal. And our methodology sometimes may be flawed in doing that, but at least everyone is on board with the mission. And I think that isn't really something that I can hear throughout the NEAR ecosystem. What is actually the vision for this, what blockchain actually does. And that's the sad thing about Web3 lately that has happened in the since 2017 is most people that are here don't even know what this is. They weren't here in 2009, 2010, 2007. They don't understand what we're built on. They don't understand what principles this is built on. Why is crypto important? What is this being doing? And so if you think crypto is about making money, then you're going to build the wrong thing. And if people are, what I've heard throughout times, that people that got the grants or sought the grants, and the thing about people like me is I'm too busy to spend time seeking a grant or even seeking a client. And that's most highly talented, highly experienced individuals are already there. And so what happens is people that are seeking money, that are going to utilize that money and soak up that money, are going to, and I call it in companies, eating your children. If you give me $2 million, I don't have to depend on that $2 million to fund my lifestyle, because my lifestyle is funded by my past successes, my investments, and my work. When you give money to someone who has to live off this money, then the burn rate is clipped, and they're figuring it out on the way. So like I met Zahid last night at one of the houses. I think that people like that already have the problem figured out, already have their solution figured out, give them money above everyone else. Don't give any money to anybody trying to figure something out, and start from the place of profit. But I was just talking, I'm sorry for sighing. It was just a political thing. We create 6 different governances, then we never get one right. What we have is a battle. In the United States, we have a 2-party system, and we still haven't gotten it right in hundreds of years. But sorry about that.
No, that was beautiful. I mean, the good news are that Matt Lockyer did get elected into the Council of Advisors. I think that enough of us were able to see that he does embody that crypto culture, the ethos, and he's been trying to have an impact. The bad news is that enough people like you or our other guests were not elected into the House of Merit, so we do what we can. One challenge that we do have in crypto and in general is trying to balance out worldviews. And a challenge that Americans often have is realizing that there is a world outside of America. Sure, you have a 2-party system in the US and you're aligned and you go to war with the same army. There's 214 other countries in the world, and guess what? For most people in the world, we actually do move and migrate to the country where we align our values, where we have opportunities. And if we choose to have a third world governance on NEAR, we're already seeing migration to other ecosystems. The Solanas, the Suis, the Aptos, they're probably here, salivating, recruiting.
But I'm not sure they have better governance system than ours.
Of course they don't have governance. What they have is a checkbook looking for builders. But to put the question bluntly, I know the answer. We can cut this out. We're live. It's going to get wild. Who failed at delivering the vision? Like, were we set up to fail because we were never given a vision to live up to? Because I feel like we're finally getting the vision. 2024 vision is amazing. Black Dragon in the house. But maybe there has to be a reset button. All the shit we have deployed last year, how do you bring everything back in-house?
So I was introduced to NEAR by Cameron, so in a hackathon in San Francisco, and since the day one, my interest for NEAR was only one blockchain in 3 years ago, who talked about AI and blockchain intersection. So since 3 years ago, there was no talk about there is a relationship between Web3 and AI. So I think there is a vision. So the challenge that I find, even as a founder, is that vision sometimes kind of feels all over the places. So there is, if we have a consistent messaging, imagine NEAR have account abstraction or smart contract accounts since day one, but all of a sudden Ethereum is kind of winning the smart contract account. They make so much buzz, and we kind of have this wonderful feature, but no one knew it. NEAR have so much narrative about AI, and NEAR's founder is one of the guy who was kind of one of the person behind today's LLM and all this AI movement, but we never could we are a great builder as a NEAR whole ecosystem, but our main problem, even I can find myself the same problem, is I'm not a great marketing person, and I don't know after building a great tech where we should take to the next level. So Solana, or other ecosystem, they do a great job of focusing on one thing and then kind of taking it to the next level.
In many ways, that is why the NDC started with so much hope. See, the vision for NEAR has actually always been clear. It's just been communicated lukewarm for a while for different reasons. But the frustration and the criticism from the community, the enthusiasts in the trenches, the people that do research about crypto 24/7 and that get it without getting remunerated and that are in it, value, mission driven. The complaint was the bulk of the ecosystem is controlled by employees. I got hired by the foundation to flip papers 9 to 5. No one knows what the fuck I do. No one knows who I am. And sadly, these people who had great intent and great qualifications were having a hard time understanding what is the vision. Whether somebody failed to give it to them or whether it wasn't included explicitly in the job description, there were gaps of where are the people out there pushing what we stand for. At the Supermoon Buildhouse last year here, there's a great photo where I'm sitting next to Ilya looking hunched and fat and terrible. Hopefully this year is better to me. Elena had to ask 3 times.
I was there.
A Russian better woman came through and she's like, Ilya, why should people give a fuck? There's 17,000 blockchains. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, she didn't say that, but there's a ton of blockchains here. I know all the founders, all the investors. Why should anyone care? You're just another dude. He paused for a moment. I'm romanticizing here. He paused for a moment. His mind took him back to Google and the shit he must have endured there. And then he finally opened up. He says, look, the world is fucked. Everywhere you look at, there's war, famine, stupid people doing stupid shit. And he must have seen something with the way that the technology was moving towards AI. We don't even understand the power that technology companies have once they aggregate all of the data and all of the vehicles, fucking algorithms, chips, whatever they put up your ass. The control that they're going to have. Politics are boring. Politics are a distraction. So him choosing to leave Google when he could have made, billions, honestly. I mean, OpenAI is paying $10 million a pop now a year for engineers. Choosing to leave to start NEAR.ai, which was, dude, I remember, I read in 2020, an Argentinian influencer, Catalina. She was going to interview me about NEAR in Spanish, but I didn't have anyone else. So I went doing some research and I found Ilya's old Medium posts. And I was like, this guy is crazy. The Medium post is still there from 2018 describing predictive language models for coding. And he's describing models that can, to a higher degree, better than humans, speed out code. And I was like, this guy's insane. No wonder they pivoted to something else. So him taking that decision to live and try to build something different should be the beginning of the story. Near is not just another blockchain. You want to do cheap transactions, you can go to Tron, and no one needs a new blockchain. Tron is amazing, actually used most of the developing country. Nobody at ETH Denver tells you that. Here people pay $60 to transfer a fucking Buffy coin. Near is not just a fast blockchain. Near is just not, let's get some money from VCs. They're building an entire stack to the open web. If you go to my Twitter, the photo I've got pinned, it's 2 years in Korea. I look like I've seen a ghost. And Ilya is talking to an Animoca dude. Privacy preserving, you can't see the other dude. I'm actually holding onto his phone. And he was showing the other dude all the shit they have to build for the vision to be realized. And whether it was the right assessment or the wrong assessment, they figured out it's a little bit too much to dump on people. So they've been going, drip. Like, sometimes we're a better blockchain. Sometimes we have an EVM that kind of works better. Sometimes we're a front-end boss, whatever, everyone's the boss. It feels like we're finally getting, chain abstraction unifies a lot of these narratives in a way that makes sense, at least at a technology level, but it still lacks that vision of why should people care? Or, why did you buy Solana and Near at 180? One writes to 250, one goes to $12, and you're still here. That is the vision that we need people to communicate. And honestly, even if it's only 15 people, give them unlimited amount of money. How would the ecosystem look like if we had 50 Matt Lockyers, 100 Jared and Joes? You can put a dollar value on it. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but if we had 10 Cameron and Dennis, the most successful projects right now, and the only ones shipping, have all been single-handedly recruited by Cameron. The amount of shit he cops is almost directly proportional with his positive influence in the ecosystem. And that's a toxicity that we have to end. NDC should have been the great equalizer. The community now has the ability to fund founders and found them. We don't need to have some fucking gigabrain we rescued from a war camp or something. We can go out there and grow every region, every vertical, just empower people nonstop. And somehow it became the great neutralizer. The handful of founders that we did have, we now treat them like I don't want to say any profession because every profession has dignity, but we're honestly treating our best performers like total shit. We're treating the most mediocre people I've seen in a very long time like the kings and pretending like this has no way out. This is the community. No, this is not the community. This is a temporal bump on the road that we have to think about how to course correct. And thank you for showing up to the Tech Talk.
Yeah, that was good. I would just follow up with saying that, when you go back to what originally Ilya on the pivot from AI is that they need to have the ability to pay people around the world, right? And that's why they founded Near. So it really did start with the premise of, helping people around the world be able to receive payments and process those independent of their jurisdiction, their government, or any of those things. So, that's really where the power is. But, yeah, it comes back to the same thing. Once again, if we really want the ecosystem to grow and to thrive, we must attract and retain talent. It's that simple. Find talent, keep talent in the ecosystem, grow talent, attract talent, recruit talent. That's really where it comes from.
So I think this is a great kind of observation. I have been thinking this thing most of my time, because imagine you are building a small startup in a Bay Area where everyone can work in Google or Facebook and get a $500,000 or $1 million salary in a year, and building an AI startup there. So this is a question always come to my mind, how in the world I will attract an engineer who will not work at Google and work in a small startup where we are trying to figure it out. So I think I did a lot of research, a lot of reading. It comes to it needs several things, but people initially follow vision. So first of all, we have to have a clear vision on what we are trying to do. Most of the talented people like challenge. You have to have something where you should be able to challenge them. So when I'm pitching, like, oh, you can go and build a LLM in Facebook, but you'll probably be one of the 300 engineer who will probably work on this small thing where you'll just spend your next 3 years on removing hallucination. You'll never learn how to build an end-to-end AI system. So I'm giving them a vision, giving them a challenge, and then, of course, the next thing is have to have a good leadership. So if I'm the one, if someone is working at 9 p.m., sending me a message, and I'm the founder or leader, and I'm not going to respond them, or if I cannot lead them by example, then no one will follow, no talent will join. So it needs a standard. So I always, there was a video from Steve Jobs. So he said, the first 20 hire is the most important hire in your company, and you want to hire the best people so that when they go out, they bring people, they will be the best people. So it is challenging for sure because there are other ecosystem, lot more money, and if you're great engineer or great at what you do, you have 100 more options. So yeah, so I believe those 4 things, vision.
I left a well-paid job in Silicon Valley to work in crypto. I still live in Silicon Valley. I think for me, specifically for me, is usually you get in a position when you can do stuff that will influence you're not a cock in the whole system. That's what is keeping me here. But the other things, are challenging, right? So sometimes you don't think, should I still be doing this? But that's the part. I still think that we can do stuff. One of the first time I met with Alejandro, I said, we're still in the honeymoon, but the honeymoon will be over. Yeah. So the honeymoon is over. So you get a lot of heat, you get a lot of, but still that work seems like wherever goes, it goes. It's influencing. It may transform into something meaningful, because in big companies you do a lot of bullshit job, right? So that's what is keeping me here. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do in DevHub. Mm-hmm. In whatever you think of us, this is a very professional team. Mm-hmm. Most of us with some kind of now time doing this in crypto, and they're willing to people to take whatever they give us and still keep doing this. So that's a difficult combination, right? If you ask my wife, she may disagree.
Yeah, I asked her if she remembers who you are, and she was like, I'd be curious to see.
But I definitely agree with Blaise on this. Bringing that kind of talent, it will be tough. It will be tough. Because, some people, when they tell, people that, only here because, for the payment, for the money. But, that's 90%, 99% of the work like that, right? You just go to a job, get paid, and, go to your family, right? So we have to, not now, but later, we have to open the space for that kind of people. Right now, the first one, no, but still you will need to people that only wants to make their job and get paid. Not everyone can do the whole.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know what our friend in the corner thinks, but one of the values that really got a lot of people into crypto in the early days was removing middlemen. And we're having a really funny conversation too late at night, last night. And one of our great contributors from outside of the US, actually it was last night, anyway, there was a very interesting reaction about visiting the United States for the first time, where you're like, this, great country, #1 in the world, and you walk around and you kind of don't understand, what is so special about these people and this place. And what I was explaining to him was that the United States is not the greatest because everyone around is the best. The United States is only the greatest because they don't let the people get in the way of the absolute best. You go to France, they're passing laws to hold you back. You message your personal assistant at 7 a.m., you go to jail. 9 p.m., you go to jail. You make too much money, you go to jail. So there has to be that ethos of, if you are the top 1%, and by the way, our core protocol engineering team at its time was the top 0.01%, you want to come here. We need to have rich intellectual conversations, engineering, product, design, mass consumer applications, whatever floats your boat. This needs to be an ecosystem where we accept the challenge to build something that for most people would seem impossible. That's fine. We don't need too many people. I mean, people say that whatever, like 6 degenerates built the iPhone. Well, I mean, we've got 6 people in this room, and you know, most of you stayed at the end of the conversation. You seem like you care. So I think that is a bad signal, and I think that's what some of the frustration is around half-baked governance, because it starts taking out the air of the room. You know, instead of talking about the amazing stuff that we could be building or people collaborating, we start talking about something that we're kind of showcasing, but it's not there yet. And then it starts creating animosity between people, and then it's harder to collaborate. So I think that as long as we have that vision and values aligned, it's much easier for everything else to follow. It just seems like somewhere along the line, we established power structures that did not have that and are now getting in the way of the best performers rising. So that's what we have to course correct.
What was the question in that? I agree with a lot of the statement. But no, I still think there's a tremendous amount of potential for the ecosystem. So the thing about me is I love when tokens are low. I love when things are undervalued. It's my favorite thing about crypto, is that you find things that are highly undervalued and you can create value around them. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity here for that. And I agree. I agree that, you know, funding should be prioritized within the consensus system. I was at the Mesh brunch yesterday. Within the consensus system, you know, funding was prioritized for Infura and MetaMask, and that's why they spun out consensus software, consensus meshing, consensus software to one thing. Now you've graduated, you're over here in consensus software, you have a separate route to capital that in larger amounts of capital. Then they spun out a lower edge, the accelerator Tachyon, and so now you flow into Tachyon. You've already had a previous success, maybe you're a previous founder, this and that, you flow into Tachyon, then you flow into Mesh. In Mesh, it's a little bit of competitive and things like that, and if you are successful or if your project has legs, then it's over here in another department. Meshing all those together and all those being battling, the fact that if a project is very successful within the NEAR ecosystem and it can work on things like onboarding, user acquisition, then it's great. I think that one thing that also needs to be focused on, which is kind of counter to the United States, within traditional economies, money flew up. So that's where success comes, is most money flows up. And those people are up, build these buildings and hold together the infrastructure and everything like that. Here, money has to not just trickle down, but circulate in a synergistic manner. We have an opportunity to create something like that, but we have to be focused on that part of the equation. And see ecosystems that want to grow, now I think that we've reached not critical mass as far as industry insiders, but we've reached a plateau where we're only going to slowly incline if it's still a circle jerk in Web3, throwing parties for people that are already in Web3 without focusing on everybody else. And then when you focus on everybody else is asking with them, what's in it for me? They don't care about crypto. They don't want to understand crypto. They think that dollars work, and you're not going to, and you can't convince someone of that through rationalization, because they're socialized to believe it. What these people need to have is an experience. What happened to me was I had an experience. By the time Bitcoin reached $1, I already knew how much I had lost. And then when it reached $200-something, I knew how much I lost. And when it was 23,000, I knew how much I had lost. And every single day, still today, I'm like, dang, I should have bought more in October. And that's the reality of that, and you can see that and you can experience that. We need to let more people experience that instead of sitting here having discussions and preaching to the choir and putting so much money into this BS circle jerk with no really women in it and no cool people in it. It's not going to work.
Thank you.
I have a question for both NDC and DevHub. I know for NDC, like you guys are still trying to figure out like how to make the ecosystem much better. But my question is, so let's say Jutsu is one of the project which will kind of get help to kind of bootstrap. Now we will probably want to grow, right? So all the emphasis right now are empowering projects and founders like who are very early stage. Maybe they're trying to build something. Like sitting here, I'm thinking 3 to 6 months from now, I don't see like where I can get like a support or help. So is there a kind of a mechanism, or are you guys thinking about like a project those who kind of want to get bigger, how you can also support them, not just only like a individual small projects?
Well, for us, ETH is in the future. We still need to figure out how the funding pipeline is. Because when you start growing up, your requirements of money will be bigger, right? So at some point you need $500,000. I mean, I'm not sure if we are the kind of need to do that, especially with that amount of money for something that could be later for profit. It qualifies as a grant, right? So that's the part that is not. I don't think it's generally clear what is our role when the project goes to the next stage, especially a project that eventually can start making money. So shall we start giving grants forever, or shall we start giving or investing in the projects? So that's the part that is
introduction.
Not
clear. So when we are a really small project, grant is wonderful. It's helpful. But when we are growing, like a messaging, how do we consistently message that align with NEAR? Or how can you guys help those projects for marketing or then investment? And then maybe like Israel, he mentioned about like in traditional finance, money goes up. Is there a way like all this project, is it incubator? I know that near Horizen have something similar kind of thing. So need some sort of alignment and understanding of, as a founder sitting here, it's hard to know where I should go for which help.
So the answer right now, we don't have that kind of funding pipeline. And in theory, there are other menus in NEAR that should be doing that, but I don't know how well they're working.
Yeah, let me, I'll answer. So a couple things, right? Number one, it's not clear. Just like you said, you're a founder, you have no idea how to get funded right now. We got to fix that. So, but it's kind of a multifold strategy. So number one, NDC has a couple things going. One, you can get those initial grants to get started, just like with DevHub. But also the other thing that NDC is doing in tandem is building a service industry. So when you look at these funding nodes like marketing, like creatives, we just stood up KYC as a service for the ecosystem, right? Eventually we're going to have these service nodes that you'll be able to go to get support. I need marketing. So you could go to the marketing nodes and get support from them. So the idea is to kind of create a service industry to create the flywheel so that we have more of a circular economy, as Israel was talking about there. But then the second thing is, at some point you graduate the incubation stage, right, and you need to accelerate. And that's where Horizen is right now. And then you take that and you divide it into two categories. Category one is public goods. Is Jitsu a public good, or is it a for-profit project? If it's a public good, maybe there is longer-term funding. But for-profit projects, you need to eventually raise money, right? So that's where Horizen is kind of that step up. But then even Horizen is coming now and saying, hey, we've got this great program, but we actually need to fund these some projects that may not be ready to accelerate, so VCs aren't ready for them, so they come back to NDC. So NDC is kind of like incubation, Horizen's acceleration with VC funding. And then DevHub is kind of down here, incubation, but they're also public goods as well.
Yeah, and just really briefly, I think Israel mentioned circle jerk, not circular economy, but anyway. what I find interesting is the problem is this sounds weird. The problem is always a little bit deeper. Some may have heard that the NEAR ecosystem had for a while a challenge in raising money from investors. And you could use that as an objective indicator of perhaps the vision was not clear, perhaps the different entities in the ecosystem were not being consistent. So these are all things that ideally we're already fixing in terms of like a vision and a narrative. But then the bigger question is, what can we do as an ecosystem, and where do we put our resources to signal to the external investors that this is worth it? So it could be as simple as having enough support mechanisms so that when projects do reach the investment stage, they're solid and have some grants and keep them alive. But as a community and as governance, you can get really playful. Like I've got a memo parked since November around like matching funds. Community treasury can have easily tens of millions. You raise 500K, we give you 500K. Like you basically delegate to a third party. You do the due diligence, you go in, I go in. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be a grant. The community treasury could be diversified by all the projects in the ecosystem in the same way that the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world came in. So these are the things that if you have the people that are not fighting and that have a slightly more sophisticated assessment of, I guess, startups, finance, etc., we could put on the table. It's just that there's just a lot of friction to get to those conversations. I'm bullish that it can happen, especially because our most toughest audience members were nodding on that one. So finally, something hits the mark. But yeah, we can work to improve that.
Okay, guys, we've been live for over an hour now. I think like hour 20 minutes. We can continue this conversation, but if any of the panelists needs to go, just want to make this opportunity available.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, DevHub.
Thank you so much, Boris, for participating.